I would like to see Bitcoin continue to develop. I mean, I think there's still improvements to make for privacy, scalability, ease of use, and I think that comes with time. I think, the internet took decades to build out, and really the key moment where it changed was the browser. That made it more accessible to like the non-programming consumer. And I think Bitcoin is kind of roughly going through its browser moment now. Maybe it's getting there, maybe it just got there, where the ease of use is getting pretty reasonable, where the average person can get into it and not have to kind of overthink things too much. So I think that there's just still a lot of development to do, but the momentum's there and the technological base is there. So I'm excited for a lot of things.
Bitcoin has had more revolutionary moments than we can count, but right now something even more important than price swings is unfolding behind the scenes. We're witnessing Bitcoin's shift from a niche tech experiment into something your parents could actually use. As Lyn Alden puts it, Bitcoin today is like the internet before web browsers, useful for tech-savvy users, but baffling for everyone else. Just like Netscape transformed the web into a global phenomenon, Bitcoin's browser moment is finally arriving. Wallets are easier to use, transactions are smoother, and the fear of sending crypto into the void is fading fast. But don't mistake this for the finish line. The real work is just beginning. Privacy still needs refining, scaling demands solutions, and let's face it, no one wants to explain seed phrases at Thanksgiving dinner. What's different this time is that Bitcoin's foundation isn't just stable, it's drawing in more developers and builders than ever before. The ecosystem is evolving fast, and it's laying the groundwork for something much bigger than the next bull market. If Bitcoin gets this transition right, it's not just another investment cycle we're looking at, it's the rise of a parallel financial system, one built not for speculation, but for real-world use. The question isn't if anymore, it's how soon. And the real question is, are you ready? Let's take a look at some insights from Lyn Alden's explosive interview to dig deeper. Before we continue with the rest of the video, do check out daily 5-minute crypto newsletter with all the latest crypto and Bitcoin news. It's a fantastic analysis of on-chain crypto data and breakdowns, and the best part is it's absolutely free. They'll cover expert predictions, breakdowns of on-chain crypto data, and any breaking news you need to know, all in a nutshell. Click the first link in the description and enter your email to join over 50,000 others in becoming a better crypto investor right now.
I think there's two paths of technology that happen with money. One is the physical money you just talked about. So we obsoleted grains and shells and stones and things like that, and livestock is money. Over time, the world gravitated more towards gold and silver because every time they ran into a competing money, they would win. The holders of gold and silver could debase the other monies, but the holders of those other monies couldn't debase the gold and silver people. And even the gold and silver people couldn't rapidly debase themselves. And so every time those came into contact, gold and silver would win. And then at the same time, there was another layer happening about the abstraction, how to move things like gold and silver more quickly. So literally the invention of paper instead of parchment, instead of papyrus, I mean. The invention of bookbinding instead of scrolls. The invention of analog encryption techniques. So if you deposit gold in a money changer and he gives you a certificate that you can then redeem in another city, it's an easier transport method. But obviously to make sure that that receipt can't be forged, it can't be duplicated, it can't be fraudulently made. So you need analog encryption to kind of prove that this is a genuine part of the network. And then the printing press to make those sort of analog encryptions more cheap and easier to scale. And so all those things were kind of technological layers on top, and then eventually the telegraph, telephone systems, internet. These are all another layers, and those are the first things that really started to compete with gold as money, because for the whole first era, hardness was what mattered. And then once the telegraph came about, speed became a variable. And so kind of the first time in history, a softer money run out over harder money because it was good enough, but faster. And then it had the power of the state behind it. And it didn't just win in one jurisdiction, it won in every single jurisdiction around the world for lifetimes. And but now, digital settlement, now that we have the internet, now that we have digital native money, it's a way to kind of say, well, here's money that's as fast as fiat and harder than gold, so we'll see how the chips fall. I think the current system is based entirely around the premise that money at the base ledger is inefficient, and these more efficient layers are built on top of it, usually state sanctioned. because as you centralize things, it's easy for the state to take it over. So instead of kind of getting gold from everyone, if everyone has their gold in 7 different banks, state only has to go to 7 different banks and be like, okay, we're going to hold the gold for you now, and that's the base ledger. So that's kind of how things gravitated. So where it's broken now is that everybody's using these centralized, efficient ledgers because there hasn't been a better alternative. And there's 160 currencies in the world. Every one of them has firewalls around them. They're all these like little arcades, right? So if you go to an arcade or a casino, you get a chip or a token that's relevant only in that area, and it quickly loses value anywhere outside of that area. And so other than the dollar, basically every currency is practically useless outside of its own jurisdiction, especially outside of the top 5 currencies. And so people are kind of trapped in these little local monopolies. We all think monopolies are bad, for the most part, and yet, when there's a currency monopoly, that's accepted as normal now because there's not really been a way to do otherwise. That's how the technology shifted. And so what Bitcoin and to some extent stable coins are ways to say, okay, we can go around these blockages. So if you think of a country, there's only 2 main ways that money goes in or out. One is physical ports of entry, which is obviously very restricted. You can only bring so much cash or gold through an airport or a seaport. And then wire transfers, which are also very restricted. And even fintech things are really kind of based on top of the wire transfer system. They're kind of just layers on top of banks. And what Bitcoin and stablecoins do is they just completely go around that. So you can bring infinite value density through a physical port of entry. If I hire someone in country XYZ to do a task, she can hold up a QR code on a video call or send me a payment string over email or DM, and I can pay her in a way that goes around her local banking system with Bitcoin or whatever, stable coins. There's even gold-backed stable coins now for the handful of people that want them. Whatever the person wants, there's now choice of money within all these different jurisdictions. So I would say what was broken before is that because of the need for centralization, there was no choice in money, and all of the power shifted towards the money issuer. And now we're in an environment where we've reintroduced competition around monies again. And so now we have an era where there's fast and hard money combined that has to compete against all these monies that are fast but rapidly inflating.
What are the misconceptions about Bitcoin and what central banks try to say about Bitcoin, and then move into what Bitcoin really is?
Sure. So one quick example before we even get into that is how the Overton window can shift based on technology. So back in the 1800s, transactions were inherently pretty private. And even if you were an authoritarian king or something, the idea that you could surveil everyone's transactions was not even really thinkable. Fast forward to today, everybody's using these centralized digital ways to transfer value to each other, and so anyone who wants to transact privately is often viewed as weird. Like, well, I have nothing to hide. What are you trying to hide with your private transactions? And yet, that's just the default has shifted, even though the need for privacy has not really shifted. And so Bitcoin's in that boat where, people are kind of like, well, what do you mean you want money outside of the state, money that can't be just debased or that can't be stopped? What kind of bad things must you be up to? And that's not really how it works. I would remind the audience that there are 200 countries in the world. Some of them are fairly benign. Other ones are fairly harsh. You can imagine if you're in any one of the countries that's run by dictators and things like that. I mean, we're in Madeira right now at Bitcoin Atlantis, and then I was on stage with Farida. She's from Togo, where democracy advocates would have their bank accounts frozen and seized and things like that, right? And that's one example of dozens and dozens out.
Gold earned its place by being unbreakable. Fiat won by being fast. Now, Bitcoin does both. It's uncensorable, borderless, and even harder than gold. Governments fear it because it shatters their control. No frozen account. No capital restrictions. Just pure, unstoppable money. While central banks print endlessly, Bitcoin verifies. Where fiat traps you, Bitcoin sets you free, the hardest money in history, now moving at light speed. For the privileged, stable banks feel normal, but for billions trapped in frozen accounts, crushed by hyperinflation, Bitcoin offers financial liberation. It's inflation-proof, seizure-resistant, and globally accepted. Wherever currencies fail, Bitcoin gives people the power to break free from financial captivity. As Lyn Alden puts it, this isn't just digital cash, it's humanity's escape hatch from broken monetary systems. The revolution won't be banked. Let's dive into more clips from her interview.
And so basically, for anyone who thinks Bitcoin has no value, they're often from fairly privileged environments. In the United States, most people don't, even though there's subtle problems with the system, most people don't go throughout their day and think, man, payments are really hard to make. And for savings, they can plow money into the S&P 500, right? Whereas in many countries in the world, they don't have that. Their money debases more quickly. There's 40 currencies in Africa, over 40 currencies. Imagine the friction of trying to do trade across 40 different currencies. Latin America has like 30 plus different currencies. These are all frictions that people face in their more daily life. And Bitcoin comes along, and Bitcoin is money that can't be debased, money that flows across borders, money that is very hard to censor. There's a high cost to trying to censor the network. And so that's all it is. And people are kind of like, they're so ingrained in the current system, they can't see why that would be valuable to people. And it's money that's portable. You can bring it with you around the world. You can self-custody it. No centralized entity can debase it. And if people want to, if you're doing something illegal, law enforcement can still extend resources to stop you from what you're doing, but the burden lies on them to expend resources to get you to stop. They can't just freeze your money arbitrarily outside of the rule of law and ask questions later. It kind of shifts power back closer to the people. That there's still power structures out there, but it now shifts the effort to them. I think another way of putting it is that it used to be that privacy was expensive to violate, right? So if you wanted to violate someone's privacy for maybe a good reason, you had to go through their physical possessions, follow them around, do things like that. But in the digital age, privacy is just easy to violate. Big databases can just collect any information they want. They can organize it with AI, and the default is not to be private. And so encryption is basically reintroducing the equivalent of walls and doors and things like that in a digital world. It's basically making it so that there's effort to violate someone's privacy, that resources have to be expended for a good reason to do it, sometimes a bad reason, but either way. And Bitcoin is the same thing for money, that it basically, the default can be towards non-debasement and censorship resistant, and if someone wants to interfere with that, there's a cost for them to trying to do so. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good thing, and I think that people don't think that way now too much, but I think that in other eras that was the norm. Thinking about it is, what are monies you can bring with you that you have a high probability that you can spend it, no matter where you go. And so some people might say they're Visa cards because it can just translate it to whatever currency there's working on, but that's reliant on a chain of trust that they hope works. If some automatic trigger goes off for fraud, their card could be shut off and they could be in the middle of another country and not being able to spend anything and have to sort that out. So if you think of money that are bearer assets that you can bring with you and you can spend anywhere, near the top list are things like dollars or gold coins. If you bring dollars anywhere in the world, you can sometimes pay them to merchants directly, or at least you could find a broker willing to kind of convert to the local currency for you. Same thing with gold. You're less likely to be able to spend it anywhere, but there's plenty of points in any country where you can convert gold to the local currency and spend what you need to do. And then euros and silver coins and things like that would be kind of next on the list. And after that, it rapidly falls off. I've made the analogy that if I have Norwegian currency in New Jersey from a trip I did, and even though that's a wealthy country, there's very little I can do with Norwegian currency. That's an arcade token that's way outside of its arcade, and it's a pretty small arcade. Similarly, I have Egyptian currency, and that's a country of 100 million people, but there's nothing I can do with that in New Jersey. The conversion points are few and far between and very expensive, and it quickly loses its moneyness. So there's 160 different currency arcades out there. There's a handful of monies like gold and dollars that can kind of flow between them and get recognized as money in every arcade. And Bitcoin is quickly becoming another one of those, and probably over time the best one. It's already, there's more things I can do with Bitcoin in New Jersey, Norway, and Egypt than I can do with any of those weaker currencies anywhere else. So I think that it's not quite at the level of, say, gold or dollars yet, but in a 15-year time frame, that trajectory has already put it in the top 10, maybe the top 5 monies that if you bring with you, you could do something with it. If you come to Madeira with Bitcoin, there's a lot of places where you can convert or spend it. And that's true for a lot of different countries around the world, a lot of different specific regions within countries. And so I think that what's happening is that over time, Bitcoin can displace a lot of the weaker currencies and start working its way up the food chain, and that's what it's already been doing. And people around the world will hold a larger and larger percentage of their liquid, cash value in Bitcoin rather than their local currency.
You say that if you play the money game 100 times, you will always end up at the same result. But is Bitcoin able to break that cycle?
Well, I think the interesting part is that if you play it 100 times, eventually something like Bitcoin would come around, right? At least as long as you get that far in a game, right? So I think in some scenarios, the world blows itself up with nuclear weapons and we go back 100 years in terms of technology, right? So there's certain, the longer you go, there's more paths that can diverge. But I think once you get to a point of an internet connected world, it's inevitable that some sort of good digital value will start to emerge.
As Bitcoin dipped to $81,000 following Trump's tariff announcement, echoing the nerves of traditional markets, it once again revealed its current identity as a high-beta macro asset. But price swings like this barely scratch the surface of Bitcoin's real purpose. Sure, its daily movements often shadow yield curves and the strength of the dollar, but beneath that, Bitcoin stands for something far more profound. The world's first global, censorship-resistant monetary network, digital gold built for the digital age. While traders obsess over charts and short-term technicals, Bitcoin quietly advances its mission. For citizens of collapsing economies and for people locked out of traditional banking systems, it's more than just a speculative asset, it's a lifeline. This is the paradox of Bitcoin's moment in history. At once a risk asset, swaying with every macroeconomic headline, and a steadily rising alternative to inflation-prone fiat currencies. For Venezuelans protecting their savings or African entrepreneurs dodging capital controls, the latest price pullback means little. As Lyn Alden points out, Bitcoin's long-term destiny isn't shaped by daily price action, but by its adoption as hard money in a world of fragile, unstable financial systems. Its short-term correlation with risk assets might stick around, but the network's march toward becoming the first borderless, apolitical store of value is already underway. Whether you see the dips as trading noise or a generational opportunity to rethink money, one thing's clear. The demand for sound money in the digital age is only getting stronger. Now the big question. Is Bitcoin truly inevitable as global money, or could something else rise to take its place? Drop your thoughts in the comments. For more Daily Dose Crypto news, check out these 2 awesome videos on your screen. Click now and we will see you on the next video.